I have used Notion for the past few years, and I'm going to condense all those years of using this one piece of software into this one video.
To teach you Notion, I'm going to show you how to make a custom productivity system that I myself use as a doctor and YouTuber.
You're going to learn everything you need to know about Notion, how to use Notion's tables, how to use Notion's formulas, and how to really make Notion a piece of software that will make your life a lot more productive. This video has a bunch of chapters, so you can bookmark it for later, so you can come back to it. And without further ado, let's get started on our first page. Except when I actually recorded most of this video, I got conjunctivitis, and because I didn't want to record myself with red eyes, I've decided to be an anime character.
Welcome to your first Notion page, but you'll notice that it's going to burn your eyes straight away because we're in white mode. If you go to the top left, you'll unveil this sort of menu, and this is where all your pages hide. But what I like to do is first go into settings and members, and then go to my settings and then change the appearance to dark mode because you really want to save your eyes from being burnt. You can close the sidebar if you want, and we can just focus on the page. Now, I know you're itching to write, but Notion, in fact, is actually just a lot of pages. You might be used to having lots of separate folders and stuff on your computer with documents littered across them, but Notion just really keeps all the pages on the left-hand side here. And if you think about Notion as a page that can access more pages, you can actually write /page and then create a new page within a page. So this is page 2, but if you go back here, you can see that we've got the original page, and this might be like something you might call page 1. So if you think of Notion as a collection of pages, that will be really helpful for just helping you navigate the software. If you want this particular page to stay in easy sight, you usually just star the page using this to add it to your favorites, and then that way it comes up as your top left page. Notion page, you can type whatever you want here. If you want to change the font or appearance of Notion, you can actually do so at the top right here. You can see that these 3 dots are right here, and you can actually change the font. Let's just say that I wanted to type whatever in Notion. The default font is actually really nice, as you can see. But if you want to be fancy schmancy, you can totally change it to a serif kind of font, and that makes it look like a more book-like font. And if you're a real nerd, you can change it to mono, but I like to keep it on default. The other thing you can do is you can actually change it to full width. So if you use that, then it's going to use the full width of the window. And I tend to like that, especially when doing things like, for example, using a big table like this, which is something that we'll definitely use a bit later on. All right, so let me show you how to write really fast in Notion. Just kidding. The very first thing you might wonder is like, where is the heading button? Because you'll notice that lots of people with Notion pages, they have headings and titles and everything like that. But here, unlike Microsoft Word, there's no thing at the top to tell you that there's headings. So you actually just access a lot of them by using /. So if you type / there, you can see that it unlocks all these blocks, which are the, well, building blocks of Notion. And you can see that there's like heading 1, heading 2, and heading 3 corresponding to their different sizes. You know, this is a big heading, and then you might say type /3 to bring up heading 3, and it'd be like, this is a smaller heading. You might be wondering, you know, why do we use headings, or, you know, why do these things even matter? And the reason that that matters is that you can actually put a table of contents here by just typing / and then contents, or just, you know, searching it, and then it automatically creates a table of contents, and then with clickable headings and stuff. So that makes it very easy to organize your different Notion pages. To show you an example of this in action, here is every topic in medicine, another page that I've got, and here are all these headings which I didn't create manually. It's all linked here in the table of contents, and then I just used the /heading tool to do that. If you're familiar with a language called Markdown, you can use that. So for example, hashtag heading will also do the same thing, or double hashtag heading will create a heading number 2. But for ease of use, I'm going to use the / to do a bunch of things today. Now, let's just say that I've got a few paragraphs. So you can see that these paragraphs, when you press enter, it creates a new block like this. If you press shift and enter, it keeps it within the same block. And so what that means is that when you move this block, it's got to keep that sentence there. You can actually move blocks next to each other as well to create columns and stuff. Or you can even select a whole block, for example, and then change the color of the block. So here in Google Images, I've got a bunch of parakeets, and if you actually go to, you know, an image and you click on right click and then copy image, or you even take a screenshot of that particular thing, what you can do is you can then just simply copy and paste it into Notion, which is very handy. So here I've just got another version of this Notion page. I've put in a different image instead, and you can see that this image, you can actually make bigger and smaller by dragging the edges, and you can even put images next to other parts of the column, for example. So if you want to put it to the left of a column, you might do that and make sure that these are dragged underneath the appropriate column in order to have that. But let's not get distracted by blocks too much, because there's a lot of Notion specifics that are really, really useful, and these shortcuts are worthwhile memorizing because they'll make your ability to use Notion super quick and therefore much more enjoyable. So for bullet points, you could type slash and then write bullet to create a bulleted list, and that would work out okay. But I tend to use dash or hyphen and then use a space, and that creates bullets a lot quicker. So if you just type anything afterwards, then you can press enter and that creates a new bullet point. You press tab and that indents the bullet point like this. So this is indentation, and you can press enter and tab again to make another sub bullet basically. If you've indented too far and you want to go in that direction, then what you do is you press shift and tab, and that lets you quickly go backwards like that. So tab does this, shift tab does that. You can also shift tab a bunch of bullets at once. So for example, here I'm going to shift tab both of these bullets because I've highlighted them both, and then that puts them both back. So that's very useful. Now, if you wanted to make a numbered list, you simply write the number 1 and then a dot and then space, and then so this will be number 1, and then you can press enter and this will be number 2, etc. And similarly, this can have sub lists as well that do the same thing as bullets with the tab and shift tab. You can start at other numbers too. For example, you can start at number 7 and then you press space, and then this will start at 7 instead, and then it'll go to 8, etc. If you type 101 and then try it, it does still work. What about if you try 1000? Still works. Okay, so it still works for basically any number. The next thing is checklists. So if you want to have a to-do list, you can type these 2 square brackets, the left square bracket, right square bracket, and you press space, and then it makes a to-do checkbox, and that checkbox can be ticked very easily. So that's very handy for creating to-dos. I think this next one is one of the most useful parts of Notion, and it's a toggle. I'll show you my every topic in medicine page because I think you'll find that very useful. So here we've got a table of contents, and then let's say a specialty like cardiovascular disease. So you can see that these toggles here, they can open and close. And what I used to do when I was studying both as a university student and then later on for my general practice fellowship exams is I would have a question be at the top of the toggle, and then I would have the answer be inside the toggle. The reason for doing this is that it's a thing called active recall, because it helps with memorization if you actually try to test yourself on answering a question before you go and answer it. So I might be like, how does aortic dissection present in people? And try to think to myself about what the answer is, in this case, I think it's, chest pain that's severe, sharp, like tearing quality, sometimes presents with differences in blood pressure in both arms. And so if I look at the answer, it's like severe chest pain, which is correct, but also acute hemodynamic compromise, which is something that I should also, probably mention. It might be a bit of a hassle to go and highlight it and then change the text color and click every time. So they actually have a shortcut, which is Command Shift H or Control Shift H on Windows. So if I select that again and Command Shift H, that makes my highlight, which is great. Now the last thing I'll do for us super nerds who are studying code and stuff is that you can do code blocks. So on the top left of your keyboard is a thing called a backtick. If you type 3 of those, you actually make a bit of code. You can change the language of the code on the top left here, and then you can write whatever code you want. For example, Python, like print hello world. Of course, when you change the language, things will change as well, so it's specific to the language that you're coding in as to what gets highlighted in the syntax. Now, let's learn how to type super fast in Notion, because this is a bunch of keyboard shortcuts that will help you not only with Notion, but actually with every other app that you'll ever use. And once you learn these the first time, people will look at you and be like, wow, you're a genius of typing. I mean, I'm still waiting for that day, but let's talk about copy pasting. Okay, so I'll put in some paragraphs about cats, and so I want to show you quickly. Now, on a Mac, I'm going to say command, but on Windows, you just basically use the control button instead. So whenever I say command, if you're on Windows, you use the control button. So if you want to select everything, that's Command and A, and that will select, you know, the entire thing, which is like for all, Command all. If you want to copy a bit, then you can just obviously press Command C, and then you press Command V to paste it. And you probably knew that. But what a lot of people don't know is Command X, which is to cut things. So let's say that I want to get rid of this part, but I also want to paste it at the same time. I want to copy and paste it, but I want to get rid of it. So the slow way to do that is to Command C, Command V, and then delete whatever you did. But that's very cumbersome. What you can do instead is you can go to here, select the whole thing, and press Command X, and that cuts it, but it's still in the clipboard, which means that you can actually paste it, even though it's disappeared. So Command X is for that. You can copy and paste images into Notion. So if you take a screenshot of something, then you just literally press Command V and it will automatically paste that into Notion. And you might have noticed that something that I'm doing a lot, which is actually implicit, is I'm selecting stuff very, very quickly. So to move around very quickly, what you do is, so let's say that my cursor is here, right? If I want to move to the top, either you can go there and just click at the top like a pleb. But what I like to do is I like to hold down Command, and then I can press up. And then you can see that you can press up and down with Command and it will go quickly to different places. It's probably more useful in Notion to go left and right. For example, if I want to go to the start of a sentence, you can see my cursor's here. I press Command and then left, and then it goes to the start, which is awesome. If I hold down Shift at the same time, it will actually select the entire sentence or the entire line. Still holding down Shift, I can press up or down to select multiple sentences at once as well. So that is very, very handy. Sometimes you don't want to go like between for like a whole line, left and right. You might just want to do a word. So then on a Mac, I'll hold down Option. On a Windows, I'll hold down Alt, and I'll go left and right like that. I'm pressing Option and left and right. And then if you want to select words while doing that, then you can hold down Shift again with your other finger and then go from left to right like that. So that is very, very useful. If you want to select a whole paragraph, let's say that your cursor is at the end, what a lot of people do is they will like physically drag the mouse across the whole paragraph. But I find that that's a bit slow. So what I like to do is I will have my cursor here, I'll hold down Shift, and then wherever I press next is going to be like, I'm going to capture the text between the cursor and click. So it's over here, I'm going to go over here, and I'm just going to click while holding Shift. And so there, I've got a whole thing. And it doesn't matter like where your cursor is, you can do that from anywhere. And Notion will select whole paragraphs very, very quickly like that. Now, of course, if you wanted to do things like bold and italics and that sort of thing, that's very easy to do as well. So for bold, you just highlight some text and then you press Command B or Control B. For italics, again, you just highlight some text and then you press Command I. And then finally, if you want to underline stuff, that's Command or Control U. That's great. So yeah, so all of that works as well. Now that that's done, let me talk about the productivity system that I use for Notion. Okay, now welcome to my Dabi system 2024. Before I start telling you about how to actually do stuff in Notion, I'm just going to very briefly explain my productivity system and how it works. You can see that this is a gigantic table of stuff that I actually do. This is my advanced to-do list system. To very quickly explain, the tasks are here on the left-hand side. They've got different priorities and I can change the status of them. I can tick them, and then the tick will actually cause the status to change as well. This thing has due dates, it's got like extra notes, it has different emojis that tell you when things are due soon. So it's a very, very powerful system. The rest of the system also keeps track of different things like different projects and different areas of my life, as well as a table of reflections. You'll notice that there's a lot of crazy little views at the top. So these views can show me different things depending on what I feel like at the time. So for example, if I want to just look at things that I do within the next 90 days, then I will click this one to do 90, and then it'll show me that, and I'll show you how to do that. It can be very overwhelming to deal with at once. If you wanted to, you can actually buy the system on my website to save you a lot of time, but I will be teaching you the whole system in this video anyway if you want to learn how to implement it yourself. The very last thing I want to say is that how is this to-do list a bit different from other to-do lists? Traditionally, to-do lists in the getting things done system is that you put everything in your to-do list. What I find tends to happen is that if you do that, your to-do list gets really huge and really unprioritized. So I actually keep like a daily list. You can just imagine it as like a actual physical page, like not a Notion page, but like a physical piece of paper and a pen, and then it will have a lot of check boxes of stuff that I want to do, and then I will literally just tick it off for that particular day as I do it. Sometimes if I don't have a pen and paper, I will use Apple Notes, I will use Obsidian, which I still use for a lot of things actually, but a daily list is just something where it doesn't matter whether the things in that list really get done that day or not. It's mainly just to keep track of what I should be doing that day. But when there's a task that I definitely have to do at some point in time, so for example, I definitely want to organize a Japan trip, then that's when it goes into this particular to-do list. I've been talking a lot, so let's get started and talk about how you can build your own. This next thing I want to show you is arguably the most important part of Notion, because I think it's really the part of the software that makes Notion Notion, and that would be the table. When you start with an empty page, if you type /table, there's kind of two kinds of tables, right? There's table and table view. When you think about tables, often you might think about things in like Excel where it's just like a simple bunch of rows and columns. You know, this is column 1, this is column 2, and this is whatever. And they're nice. You can add rows, whatever, but they're not very powerful. They can't do anything. These things don't really interact with each other. And you can't have different types of information inside them. So that's where table views come in. And with a table view, which if you type /table and go to table view, you get this thing that asks you if you want to create a new database. What you do is you just click on new database to start off with, and that creates this sort of special kind of table. I'm going to call this the Dabi productivity system here, and just name that as my thing and favorite that. You'll notice that this table immediately is a bit different. Like now it's got its own headings and it's got its own different data types. If I wanted to start off with this, right, and just make a very basic list, I might rename this bit to tasks, and then I might put like get groceries, wash laundry, conquer the world, and then I want to add like a checkbox, right? So I'm going to click on plus, and then you'll see that you've got a bunch of properties, which are different types of data that you can put into your table. So I'm going to put a checkbox, and checkboxes are very nice. You can drag and rearrange these columns, and you can even change the size of the columns. If I have a checkbox, when I tick it, then yay, it can be done. But you'll immediately notice that there's something wrong with this to-do list, which is that if I was to put lots of tasks and I do them, well, they don't really disappear anywhere. So what I want to show you next is that there's a filter tool where you can actually change what you see and what you don't see. And if you just sort of hover at the top right of your table and click filter, you can see that it's got a filter by and then all the different things that you can basically touch inside your table. So if I put filter by checkbox, and then it gives me another option to say, is this checkbox checked or unchecked? If I want to get rid of to-do list items, then I want to show only the ones that are unchecked, right? So if I do that, you can see that all my tasks have disappeared. They're gone. But they're not really gone, because what you're doing is you're just filtering them out. So they still exist in the table. And if you actually click checked here, you can find them again. So you don't have to be scared that you accidentally clicked something. Let's say that you have different tags, and this is like a tag. This is like daily life tag, and this is a daily life tag. And this is conquer the world, which is like big, great ambitions. And then I'm just going to edit this so that big great ambitions is like green, so it looks different. So you can see that I've got different categories for my different things. I can use the filter again and just add a filter here. And then I'm going to change tags to just show my big great ambitions. So if you want to save that as like a separate table that you can access at any time, you can actually click on the plus here, and then that creates a new view. You can see that the new view has revealed everything again. I'm going to name this one the daily life. And the reason for that is because I want to filter it and just have the ones that are in my daily life section like this. Tags, there you go. Okay, and then obviously if they're done, I want them to go away when they're done. So I'm going to filter that out so that the checkbox has to be unchecked in order to exist in this particular view, which is what we call it. So if I click that, then groceries are gone forever. Oh no, they're not gone forever, but they've disappeared from our view. If I go back to our table and sort of just get rid of these filters, you can see that they're still there. That's how you make different views in table view. Something a bit peculiar that you'll notice about these is when you hover over them, they actually say open. It's because each of these individual cells are actually pages as well that you can edit. So for example, if Conquer the World has multiple different steps, you might actually want to open that as a page, and then it will make it as a page. You can see that the icon has changed, and you can see that this new page has come up on the side. You might put some descriptions here. You can even put in another table view if you wanted to. You can put anything in this page. So that's very useful. World's your oyster, so to speak. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete these. Actually, I'm going to keep the checkbox and then change the name of the checkbox to just done. There is a reason for that. If you see it's done there. You can also change the icons here as well if you wanted to, just by clicking on the heading and then clicking on the icon and then searching for whatever you like. So for example, like tick or correct. You might search correct, and then you got different types of ticks that you can do if you like. Checkboxes, of course, are just one type of property, but there are many types of properties, and so let's explore those. So if you press plus again, probably the most useful property to start off with is the select. You might have noticed that the tags thing was automatically filled out, but actually what that really is a select. And a select is just a bunch of different categories. So for example, I might put a priority here, and then I can put like high, I can put medium, I can put low, and then it'll create those different categories for me. With categories, it means that when you create something new, do the and you can change the priority here, and then you can see that the categories that we just filled out now come up as options. If I even start typing just the letter M, it will immediately come up with medium. So that makes it very quick to fill out categories. Of course, sometimes you might have messed up a category. So let's say that I might have accidentally, slipped my finger and type medium H and be like, oh god damn it, now every time I have a new task, like I have to switch between medium and medium H. Oh man, you're gonna like punch the screen if you have to see that every time. So to avoid destruction of your property, you can actually go to the columns here, you can go to the heading, you can go to edit property, and then you can see that your options come up here on the right hand side. That way you can just kindly go to your thing and delete it. Are you sure? I am very sure I want to delete that. The other thing is you might think, these colors are a bit weird. High as green, like high priority means I am wanting to skedaddle. I want to do my stuff ASAP. These colors are wrong. To change that, you can go to edit property, and then you can click on the property, and then you can change the color. So I might put high priority as red, medium priority as yellow, and then low priority as blue. And then that way, now the colors are more sorted. But not only that, you'll also notice that there's a certain order. Here, for example, if I click on sort, you'll notice that if I want to sort by priority, I mean, it's actually already in the correct order by default, right? Well, let's say that I was making different properties, and then I had ultra high as another property, but this is not sorted correctly because I've typed that in at the wrong time. So in order to correct this mistake and put ultra high in the place that it should be, I will go to edit the property, and then I will shift where I think it should be on here. So if I put ultra high up here, you can see that now it is in the correct place when I've sorted by property. You have to click on sort by priority ascending. If you do descending, it'll obviously do it in reverse. So sorts are very, very useful. I personally like to make a status as well. You can see that the status property is actually a special one because it's already got some inbuilt stuff. It's got not started, in progress, and done. And so it's kind of like got these like subcategories, but really it's just like a fancier version of select. So I'm gonna put different in progress ones as now or next. And then that way, if I want to, for example, wash my laundry now, then I can create a new view and then call it the now view. And then in this one, I'm just going to filter. So if I click on that, then I can just change it to only show me the ones that are now. And then I can click back and forth between these different ones. And that's very, very nice and very, very easy. I'm going to delete this one. Next, I like to use notes a lot, which is just like text by itself. And in real life, the reason for using notes is that sometimes stuff is happening, or I'm waiting for someone to get back to me, or some note has a number that I need to call. So I'll put whatever details I put in the notes so I can quickly look at it at a glance instead of having to go to the page of the to-do list to figure out what's going on. So here are my notes. I might be like, call the laundromat. of blah, blah, blah. I've just typed a random number there. And yeah, that would be great. I can add whatever notes I want there. Now I'm going to speed run through some of the more intuitive properties because they're just useful to know that they exist. So for example, you can put in a date. Here, I like to put in an open date, which is when I can start the task, and then a due date, which is when the task is actually due. The reason for that is because I can actually use these dates in different formulas to tell me when things are due or not due. I'm also going to put a formula here, which is really cool, and that's going to be till due, because a formula is something that you can use to calculate stuff between different properties. For example, if I want to calculate the number of days between today and, December 22nd, then I can do that by simply creating a formula in here, and I'll show you how to do that afterwards. And now we're starting to get a really functional table, a really functional to-do list. Something you'll notice that if you go back to different parts on different views, putting in different things will mess up the columns where they are, so you can just rearrange those again. Sometimes if you want to hide a column, so for example, let's say I don't want to see the notes section, then you can actually right click on that and click hide in view. To undo what you just did, you can literally just press Command Z on Control Z, and even if you alter different things, let's say I accidentally deleted the do the boogie woogie because I made a mistake, then I can press Command Z and then it will restore my boogie woogie. Now keep in mind it's also worthwhile to just quickly give this a name here. And I like to call this first table database because really that's what it is. It's like a database of all the different cells. I don't want it to leave any cell hidden because I can put that into later tables. So the next powerful thing that I want to show you about tables is I want to show you how automations work, because you will notice at the moment that when I click on the checkbox, well, the status doesn't change, and it shouldn't, because there's nothing like connecting the checkbox to the status. But what you really want is you want to click on a checkbox, and then you want that checkbox thing to be clicked. You want then the status to be done. And if you're manually having to click on a checkbox and then click here and click done, that just seems like too much effort. It's like too many clicks, which are unnecessary. So what I do is I set up automations. And if you go to the top right here, you can see there's a bunch of different things here. Click on automations, then that's a good one to use. You've got a trigger and you've got an action. So what I want to do is I want this checkbox, when that's ticked, to do the action of changing the status to done, right? It's actually very simple. You just literally click on it and try to figure out how to do as you describe. I'm going to get the done checkbox to when it's checked, then I want it to change the status to done. And I'm gonna write that, and I'm gonna create that. And so my automation now works. So what should happen is that if I click this checkbox, then it should automatically, it'll take a moment, but it should change that to done. I didn't change it myself, they changed it for me. So that's fantastic. You probably want the opposite to happen, right? So for example, let's say that for whatever reason, you have this checkbox and then you click done here, but then it's not checked. So we need to figure out also how to do it the other way around. So just again, to show you, I'm going to go to automations here, and then I'm going to create a new automation so that when the status is changed to done, because you want to deselect everything else, right? Then I want to change the checkbox to be checked, and then press complete. What will happen is that now if I have a thing like this task, and then I click on it and then click done, it should check the box for me without me like being around there. And you can see that's done. But in my real Notion table, you'll see that my due date actually has a number of days till it's due. So for example, today is actually the 19th of December, and this due date is December 15. This task was due -4 days ago. That's kind of sad. But to calculate that, this number does not appear automatically, and so you have to use what's called a formula. Formulas are very, very powerful, and they're very, very useful, and even knowing the basics will really be very helpful for you. So to figure out the number of days before something is due, what I'm going to do is I've hidden like a bunch of the different properties. You can always reveal the properties again by going to the top right and then clicking the eye to make them reappear, but in this case, I'm going to make them disappear. And if I wanted to calculate the number of days between now and when something is due, then what I'll do is I'll click on the plus up here, and then I'll type in formula to get formula. I'm going to put days till due, and then what I'm going to do is that it's got this edit button, so you click on that, and then you get greeted by this window. Now this window could be very complex. In fact, there's a lot of different things that you can choose, so that's quite hard. What I like to do is I tend to literally just Google for different formulas and stuff when I need to figure out something, because you'll often like search like Notion how to calculate days between dates, and then someone will have figured it out. But to show you how to do this one in particular, you'll notice that you can access the different properties inside your database, which is cool. But, this is stuff that we've created before. You can access the tasks, you can access the checkbox that we've done, you can access even the date. And so we definitely need to access the date. So here, just thinking about it, I want to do something with the due date. But what is it that you want to do exactly? Well, you want to calculate the time between now and the due date. So how do you do that? You Google. You Google, and someone will have written the formula. But so if you did that, you'll find that there's actually a formula called date between. And so the date between, you can see that here on the bottom right, it gives a description of like how to physically write the formula. So here so it'll say like this bit and this bit and this unit, right? So here it takes a date, and then it also takes another date, and then it takes a unit. For example, you can see that it takes the date of now, it takes another date, and then it splits it out in days, so that it calculates the date between now and whatever this date is to make days. In our particular case, we're going to intuitively think, well, if I'm figuring out the days till something is due, I want to figure out the difference between what is now, bracket, and then put a comma there. You've got to make sure to put a comma, because otherwise it's not going to work. Now, and then the due date, which is actually a property in our thing, so you can just luckily put that in there. And then you want to use an open quote, because you want to try to match whatever this is as closely as possible. So if there's quotes there, you want to put quotes here as well. And then put days. And if I click done, what should happen is, hurrah! Now you'll notice that there will be discrepancy because it's December 19 and technically December 19 to December 22. There's going to be 3 days difference. The reason I think for this happening is that right now at this second is 12:38 a.m. where I am at, and there might be some complicated stuff with time and maths and time zones. I'm not sure. So if you wanted to edit the formula to adjust for that, you can just edit the property and go there, and then you can add +1 to it if you want to and cheat. The reasons for doing this formula is because actually this formula is very, very useful for days till due. The reason being that, let's say that I've got something that's due next March, and then it's 85 days. I've got another task that's due, let's say, just in 49 days and less than 2 months. So here I might want to actually sort by the number of days that things are due. So I can simply press sort and then days till due, and then I can immediately see what tasks are technically the most pressing tasks. So that's very, very useful. Alternatively, I might want to not even bother with tasks that are a certain time distance away. Things that are 85 days into the future, that's for future Dabi to deal with. But present Dabi does not need to do the boogie woogie. I've got washing laundry and new tasks to do earlier than that. So here I can just use filter and then simply filter the days till due, and then get like less than, let's say, 60 days, less than 2 months basically. So then I can only see things that are due in the next 2 months. Now, I want to show you the next part of this productivity system, which is the open date. So open date is something that I created to basically tell me when I should start doing a task. Because sometimes I don't want to do a task till later, and I can sort of have an idea as to how much later I want to do it. So let's say that washing laundry, I can do that today. New task, I might just call it something else. like chop some bananas. So I might want to do that on the 20th and then do the boogie woogie. I might think about starting the boogie woogie in the new year. I might just show you quickly what it looks like in real life. For example, there's a video that I want to plan out much later where I go to different animal cafes in Tokyo, but I don't have a real urgency towards planning that video because I should be able to plan that out maybe a month before I go to Tokyo. That's why I put the open date as February 1, 2024. And by doing that, I can actually create another formula that recognizes when tasks are open or not open. So therefore, I use a filter called can do. I use a different view called can do, and then can do only has, you know, things that are due soon, can do or overdue, but it does not have the animal. Like, no matter how far you look, it does not have the animal cafe video because my filter is only stuff that is due or that I can do. And it's because in this view of things that I can do, I want to filter it out so that it only contains things that, you know, have the word do or have the word do. That's confusing. But the only task that's not there is that one animal cafe task, which is not even open. So how do you create these formulas? I'm just gonna write up here for reference. Today is December 19, just to make it easy. Now I'm gonna go quite quick through this section. So feel free to just, you know, skip to the end of the section and then have a general look at the big formula of it all if you wanted to. But the way to do this, if you want to learn formulas, is I'm going to do an ifs and then I'm going to create another thing. So ifs is like a bunch of if statements, and is when the properties inside here are filled and correct, then it will be true. And then if it's true, then you can say something is like done or not done. So for example, I want to say something is not open. It's like formula number 1. And then here I want it to be can do. And lastly, I also want to have one where it's like done as well. The cool thing about this is that you can have different emojis, and I like to do that. So I'm going to put in a few. But this formula obviously is not going to work yet. If I press this done, everything starts off as not open, which is the default. But actually there is some stuff that is open. So for example, washing laundry should be open. So what I need to do is I need to fill out these things. And basically, if everything inside this bracket is true, in other words, they're all accurate, then it means that the bracket will be activated. You can think of it like that. So for example, if everything here is true, then it will be not open. I'm actually going to switch around the order because I wanted to figure out whether something is done first and then figure out whether something can be done. And finally, if something can't be done, then I want it to just be not open. Here, the statements are, so here, logically speaking, if you think about if something is done, it just means that the checkbox is done, right? So either here, in this case, like our checkbox, which is our done checkbox, is, well, checked. Yeah, if it's done, it's done. So that's cool. And so what will happen now is they're all done because obviously I've checked all the boxes. So let me uncheck those to make it not done. And you can see that they've changed immediately, which is cool. They've gone to the next box, which is here. And here, if something is open, I want the open date to be like before today or less than now, if that makes sense. So in other words, let's say that, you know, today is December 19. So if the open date is December 10, well, December 10 is less than December 19. So that should be the can do, basically. So if this works, then what will happen is now it correctly works. So yay, it actually worked really, really well. So this thing, which I can do on December 22nd, you can see that that's not open yet because today is December 19, you know, it's not open. Similarly for the one on January 1st, it's not open either. And that's because of the way that we've coded our little formula, which is great. So by default, it's not open. Now, my real life formula is like a lot more insane than that. So if you go to here, this is my real system, and then I'm going to show you the exact system that I use here. But the formula here is like way crazier. In fact, it's probably a little bit messy actually. Looking at this one, I wanted to account for if something is done and the due date is more than now or less than now. Well, technically if it's just done, then you can just click done. So actually these two could probably become one. Here, if I wanted to have now is before the open date, then it's not open. If I was going to have, now this is really complicated. So this is for something that's overdue. Before you even look at this formula, you just think, okay, something that is overdue is something that is past the due date. But what I wanted to do is I also wanted to make sure that something has to be not done as well. Because if it's done, but it's past the due date, it's fine. It's not overdue anymore. It's just physically done. So here I put in, well, like that exact thing, but all in this codified terminology, but all in this codified sentence. So for example, I have to say that thing is not done. And then I want the date between the due date and now to be less than 0. In other words, I want the number of days to be like in the negatives. It should have been done 5 days ago, means that -5 should be the number, and -5 is less than 0. So therefore, that thing is overdue. And here I've set some arbitrary numbers. So for example, if something is due soon, I've made it 30 days here. And then if something is like I can do it, but I don't have to do it, then I don't want it to be due soon. So I'm just gonna put it as can do. And here I put above 29, which basically means it's gonna be like, 30, 31, 50, 100 days, whatever. I can do it, but I don't have to do it now. If there is for some reason something that doesn't fill one of these conditions, then it becomes this other emoji. I'm not sure what emoji it is because it's not showing on this formula. Yeah, if you wanna just screenshot that version of the formula, you can totally do that. Otherwise, if you want to buy the system, you can get that as well instead of copying it by hand. And the last thing I want to show you about this productivity system right at this second is when something is blocking something else. So for example, let's say you have 2 tasks, but you can't do them unless you do one after the other. So one task is going to be buying groceries and the other one is going to be cooking dinner. And so the problem with this is that you can't actually cook dinner until you buy the groceries, right? So that's what's called a blocking task. Now, this is a very basic example, but you can quickly generalize this to other examples in your life where, for example, if you're doing code, sometimes you might have to code one piece of code before you can code another piece. If you're working on a project of some kind at university, some part may have to be written before another part. So we're going to use this bit here, which is actually something we haven't used before, called a relation. So when one task blocks another, we want to create a relation between those 2 tasks. So for example, cooking dinner, in order to do that, you have to actually buy groceries first. The way you set up relations is you simply click the plus here, and I've moved my head over to the side because I was blocking it before. Then you change, you could type in relation and then it comes up with that. You'll notice that you can link it to other databases or other tables, but in this particular case, we're going to make it link to this table because they're all in the same table. So to do that, I'm just going to, let me give this table name, relations example, so that now that will come up like this. So to set up relations, it's useful to have a name for your table. So I'm just calling this relations example. And then you click the plus, and then you simply look for the relations when you click on the plus. I'm going to type it in, and you'll find that it comes up here. Now, it's going to ask you to link it to a database. You can actually connect databases together, or in other words, you can connect tables to other tables. But in this particular case, we're just going to connect it to itself. In other words, if you click on relations example, then it's related to this database, and then you can add a relation here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the name of this to blocking, so that you can see that here it gives an example of what's actually happening. This table, one thing inside of it, for example, buying groceries, is blocking another thing inside of it. Here, it's useful to realize that actually tasks don't block each other. For example, cooking dinner is not in the way of buying groceries. You can buy groceries at any time. So I like to separate the directions. So here you can put the related property, which is the reverse thing. In other words, being blocked by in this case. And then that would actually make sense. So one task is blocking another, and the other task is being blocked by the first task. Buying groceries, you have to buy groceries before you cook dinner, otherwise it's blocking the cooking dinner. And then the cooking dinner part is being blocked by the fact that you have not bought groceries yet. So that's how relations work here. Then I can simply exit this, and that will be working okay. The cool thing is that once you actually set up this task, so let's now actually put in the fact that buying groceries is blocking the cooking dinner part. And you'll see that actually the pages in the database that you selected will come up here automatically. Then I can say, hey, this one's blocking cook dinner. But automatically, now like the cooking dinner part is being blocked by buying groceries. So that's really useful. So the way I use relations is that I'd like to connect the different tasks that I'm doing to the different projects that I might be working on, which is kind of an idea from Tiago Forte's Building Second Brain. So for example, here I might connect my like zero integration, the accounting thing, with a bunch of logistics, finances and obligations. And so if I go down to projects here, which is another table, then I've actually created a relationship between those two things. There's a relationship here, and then all the tasks that are related to that one project are sort of hanging around here. As you can see though, I get a little bit lazy with these different things, but to be less lazy, I should probably, make sure to put the different tasks for all of them. And I can do that quickly by going out of the cell, pressing Command C, and then just quickly copy and pasting in between here, because all of these are related to my YouTube channel, for instance. Now here, I've taught you quite a lot of both basic concepts, but also actually quite a fair bit of reasonably advanced stuff. And the reason being that I think that Notion is really powerful, but a lot of its power comes from some of the more complex functions that you can do with it. Because otherwise, if you just want to do simple stuff, you can use other softwares for it. So in the next part of the video, I just want to show you very quickly about different parts of the table view as well that I haven't covered yet. And I'm going to cover them pretty quickly because I think that just knowing about them means that you can use it. Something about Notion tutorials is that they can take a very long time, but I want to try to move through things efficiently and assume that you're like a very, very smart person if you're watching this video. Haha. So let's go through it quickly. All right, so back to here, we're just going to create another table. And the things we're going to cover in this table is just all the stuff I didn't cover in the other table, basically. Now, multi-select is just something where you have different categories. For example, you've got something that is like the anatomy of the heart, for example. That might be both in cardiology and anatomy. So it's like multiple categories in one. It's the same as select, except that it can have a few different things inside of it. You already know about status and you already know about date. Person is a very useful property. So for example, if you have a team and you want to notify or pass things between a team, you can just notify different people that they're supposed to be working on something. And then that way you can also filter out who's supposed to be working on what. Files and media lets you attach different documents. You can attach zip files, Excel files, whatever you want. Now, I personally don't use Rollups that much, but I will show you what they do because maybe to someone they will be useful. Now, let's say that you want to record everything that Spider-Man ever bought from a particular store. You're going to create something here, which will be items purchased. So here what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a relation because I want it to be connected from this thing to this table. A relation just basically is a fancy way to connect tables together, either to itself or to other tables. So here I'm going to connect it to goods, and here I'm going to add that relation like that. And here, let me put some prices. So spider gloves, maybe they cost like 20 bucks, and then spider suit maybe costs 50 bucks, and then Wolverine claws costs $300. Let's say that here we're going to call it goods purchased because Spider-Man is on a shopping spree, right? So let's say that he's purchased the spider gloves and then he's also purchased the spider suit. So here I've got that here like this. But what am I going to do with this information? Well, ideally I want to calculate the sum of everything that he's purchased, right? So that's when the rollup comes in. And then if I use this rollup, I can actually calculate different properties. So here the relation is again going back to that other table of goods purchased. You can see that it's just repeated itself, which is not what I want. I want to calculate the sum of everything. Fortunately, if I look at the calculate thing, then I can say, oh, like there's a count all, there's count values, there's count percentage. If I change this property to price, then you can see that now it's showing the original price here, $20 and $50. But finally, I want to actually calculate it. I can go click on calculate and then do sum, and there we go. Now we can figure out the cost of everything that Spider-Man has bought. And for Wolverine, let's say that he buys the Wolverine claws, that will also come up there as well. I'm going to show you how I used Notion for my fellowship exams in general practice, because I think that that will be helpful to people that aren't even necessarily in medicine. This is more like not just Notion, but describing how to learn different things in a really functional and effective way. You don't have to go crazy with stuff. If you keep stuff simple, then you can actually still get a lot out of Notion. But I decided one day that I wanted to just put every single topic into one gigantic page. There was no statuses, there was no relations, there was no nothing, there was no anything. And I wouldn't do it like this again necessarily, but because I wanted to just keep things simple, I would put every condition that I was supposed to learn for a particular subject and then put it in under a heading like this. And then every condition was under a toggle list. For example, and I've mentioned this before, but let's say causes of troponin elevation. In my mind, there's quite a few causes, just basically anything causing heart damage. So then I would just chuck in bits about a particular topic inside there. In this particular part, this is just a random question by itself, but sometimes, for example, let's have a look at acute heart failure, I might put in a lot more information into there. These toggles will have toggles within them that are different questions, and when I look at these questions, I want to be able to look at the question and not open, like it's really, really important not to open the toggle immediately, because you should be thinking actively about what the answer is. So the reason being that if you try to answer the question in your head, it's like you're testing yourself. I found that this is much more effective than rereading and summarizing. And so for differential diagnosis of acute shortness of breath, which is should be a basic topic for medical students, like you just think about all the cardiorespiratory stuff, for example, and then you think about the non-cardiorespiratory stuff. Cardiac stuff, pretty easy. It's going to be your heart attacks, your acute myocardial infarctions, it's going to be your heart failure. It can be other things like, pericarditis could, if it causes like compromise to the heart. And then you think about your respiratory causes. So anyway, the list goes on and on. Here, when you open up the topic, then it's like, oh, holy moly, like there's actually stuff that I forgot. For example, I didn't even mention pneumonia. Doing a question answer thing like that tests you, and because if you miss bits, then the bits that I miss are now reinforced in your brain, so you won't miss them again, or at least you'll try not to. And so then for me, what I did is, if I knew a topic very well, I would usually put it in green. If I didn't know a topic that well, even now peripheral arterial disease is still something that I'm a bit confused by sometimes, I'll put it red. And it means that I need to go back and have a look at the different questions and go through it again, because I'm not quite comfortable with that topic yet. And you just do that for like hundreds of different topics and you'll be good. One of the other reasons that I did this particular thing is because actually there is a software called Notion to Anki, which I've talked about in another video long ago in the past. I actually don't even know if that software is still around, but you used to be able to turn toggles into flashcards very easily. So if that software is still around, then use that, because Anki is very good for spaced repetition, and spaced repetition is still, in my opinion, the best thing for long-term learning. I have friends who are now, dermatologists, they're ENT surgeons, they're like GPs, and lots of people, doctors, used Anki, and that's why those guys are really, really smart. So those guys are like the youngest, like people to get into the different specialties, or they're like winning prizes in like really competitive specialties and that sort of thing. And a lot of it, they attribute it to a combination of active recall and Anki. Basically, Anki is a huge one. Something that's very, very useful as a university student is templates, because you might find that you're kind of rewriting the same things over and over again, which you don't want to do. Let's say that you have the curriculum, for example, right? And you've made a table view. So when I've typed in these different things, like I kind of know what's going to go in them. For example, I might have clinical manifestations at the top, I might have investigations, I might type in management, and then for each of those sections, just typing in, the usual stuff. So here I've just typed that very quickly, and it's, it's not super comprehensive or anything. It's going to be a real chore to type like clinical manifestations, investigations, and management for every single medical condition, because now I have to go here and I have to type it all out again. It's going to be real messy. Oh, I don't like that idea. So what you can do instead is you can create templates. And templates are very useful because they let you just reuse information. So you go to the top right of your table, where it's got a little drop down arrow, and then you click new template. And then, well, this can be like a condition template or something. You write whatever you want to call it. And then whatever you write in here, just put something that's blank. So for example, I want to do the same thing, clinical manifestations, I want to do investigations, and I want to do management. Just leave that blank. And now that your template is complete, once you click out of there and press that drop down again, you can see that it's come up as a new template there that you can use. In fact, if you just click on that, then it automatically creates something that fills out your different sections for you, so you don't have to retype it again. And you can put anything in this template. It's just like a whole page, so do whatever you like. In real life, and I've talked about this before, I still use this thing called a clinical Zettelkasten. This is a bit different because I wanted to learn stuff on the job, and especially as a medical student, you'll learn a lot of things on the wards that are like very specific to that ward or like very specific to that time, but you're not quite sure where to put it necessarily, because like it's not, ideally you might try to put it in the every topic in medicine thing into a big page where it's like nice and structured, but often you just do not have the time to physically get to that page in time and write it when someone has just told you a sentence and you're scurrying off to the next patient, right? So what I did was I created a clinical Zettelkasten, and this is just a big table where if there's anything that I learn, I'll add it to this table so I can search it for later. So for example, like here I've got something about common poisons and toxicology scenarios, which I just learned about fairly recently. And so I just wanted to put like a few key points in like a separate text box talking about the 3 sentences. It's quote 3 sentences because you can see that it's obviously not 3 sentences. But this is why at a glance I can see stuff very quickly. I created it like this because I wanted to... What is this one? How to do ear surgery, cut off the ear. I don't remember when I put that. Okay, let's pretend that one was not there. I use the search function of this quite a lot. So for example, one of the things I always just forget is how long do I have to keep sutures in a patient for? Like I've cut out some of their skin in order to remove a skin cancer, but I forgot how long do they need to be stitched up for before I remove the stitches. So what I've done is I've created a bit where if I type in sutures, then I can easily find the suture times there because I've written it in there. And then if I want to be even more detail, I mean, that's a lot of detail already. There's probably too much detail actually, but I've got a lot more stuff that I learned about sutures that I can look up at any time in this table. I did originally have like specialties and topics and stuff like that, but that just gets unruly over time. The more complexity that your system has, the more time that it will take, even though this video tutorial is actually very, very in-depth, but like, hopefully with that amount of complexity that you learned, you'll actually be able to do 90% of the stuff that you need for Notion. Because I probably only use 50% a lot of the time, and it's still like very, very effective. Now I should very quickly talk about Notion as a STEM student in particular. Like for example, if you're doing computer science or physics or whatever, like I'm not one of you guys, but I will just quickly explain what I do know that is helpful for you. So as I mentioned before, the free backticks creates a code block. You can make that code block anything, food equals potato, and then you can use any language in there if you wanted to. You can do LaTeX as well if you're like doing maths. LaTeX is something I don't really know much about, but anyway, it exists. So yeah, for maths people, there you go. And lastly, you can see that you can embed a bunch of different types of files. So for example, if you're doing graphic design, you can embed Figma stuff there. If you're doing Sketch, you can do that. CodePen and Replit, some of you guys might use. And like the list goes on, like there's a lot of different integrations that Notion has, so feel free to look around for that. It is like 2 a.m, so I'm gonna very quickly speed through how I use Notion as a creator, because I think that Notion for side hustles or creative projects has a bit of a different, there's different things that are very useful for it. And I think that I want to show you those. This is a page of videographic techniques where basically anything that I learned from videos that I want to use in future videos, I'll just keep a gigantic table of like stuff that I learned. Perhaps one of the most useful things that you can use Notion for is actually using the Kanban system. Now, a Kanban is a very special type of board. It's different because it's still composed of a table for the actual data. In fact, if you actually look at the data, it looks like this. So here we've got a table, and this table can become the board. But how does it become the board? Here I've got this status, and the status indicates different sections of the production pipeline for videos. So something that's a video, like this is a bit confusing. If I go to the board, it actually becomes very easy to see. It starts off from something that's not started, like a script or whatever, and then sometimes I will chuck it into next by simply dragging from something that I've done to next. Once I've written it, then let's say like 11 lessons that every YouTuber should know, I might drag that into the written section. And then after I want to start recording it, I'll drag it to record. And so these are all part of the status property. And you can actually decide the order that you want to change, like you want this board to appear. So for example, if I wanted to put the written after the recording, which doesn't make sense, but if I theoretically wanted to do that, I will go to this top right corner here and then go to properties and then go to the status section where everything is. And you can see that this is neatly grouped in order there. So if I actually change the written part to here, it'll flip around the order of stuff. So that's how you organize your actual Kanban. After I record, I'll get one of my 2 editors to edit the video, and then after they edit it, it goes into my review pile, of which you can see there's a lot that I need to do. So this is why I've been a bit busy, sorry. Eventually when I review it, it will make it to published, but that takes a little while. Now, there's a few key things you should know. Changing something from this Kanban, for example, if I wanted to change it to bait editing here, that actually does update the property. So if I go to table, then I filter by the ones that have the status of just bait editing. That one that I dragged into the Kanban will now adopt that status correctly. And similarly, if I get rid of it, then we go back to the table with that filter, it's gone. The other thing is, you'll notice that some of these have like little captions or little notes there. And that's the reason is because I've actually put a notes property onto the page to display the notes property, because it's not on by default. So what you need to do is you need to go to the top right again, and then with the property section, you can hide it or show it. So here I'm going to show that. If you wanted to, for example, also see what the title is or the thumbnail, you could totally do that. So that's very useful for your visual Kanban board. Probably the other thing that's really important about doing things as a creator is templates are very, very helpful. So if you go to my actual video production board, which is even crazier, don't pay attention. I need to clean it up. It's actually a bit messy at the moment. But you can see that I've got all these different templates, and I might just show you like an early version of what templates used to look like. So here, they will go through like an idea test. There'll be like a section for describing what the video is, the title and thumbnail, some of the structure stuff. And obviously I didn't want to type this out every time. So then I just made it as a template. To make a template, which is very easy, all you need to do is go to the top right, and then you click on this arrow here and then select new template. You have to make sure to select new template and not just new, otherwise it's not going to save. And then you call the template whatever you want, quite literally here. And then, you might put in a heading of template heading, something else, and whatever. So basically when you do that, then it means that if you exit out of that, you can now re-click this drop down here, and then your whatever you want template has become a new template. And so it automatically generated these headings here. So you can do that with anything. So yeah, that's how I use Notion as a creator. Notion does have AI. It is paid. I use it a little bit. Basically, to do it, you press space for AI, and then it gives you a bunch of things that it can recommend. You can, for example, ask it to write 2 paragraphs about cats, which is what I used for the previous video. And then when I send it to the AI, well, the AI will do it. It's like an alternative to ChatGPT, I guess. It's not very good compared to ChatGPT, but it's also not too bad. If you have something like this, you can just highlight it, and if you want to apply AI to it, you can press Command and J or Control and J, and then, you can fix spelling and grammar. If you've written an essay, you can make it shorter, you can make it longer, you can summarize it, you can even translate it. But yeah, anything that you've got there is you can do. So one thing, for example, that I tried to use it for was I was like, can you just create a checklist of things to do before I go to Japan? And then it will actually use checkboxes and stuff here. So that's cool. I think the tables in AI are a little bit more interesting. So for example, if I create a table here, and I'll just create a new database, and let's say I'll write a big hefty note. Okay, so here I pasted this one, which has got warning, this is a huge topic, because oh my god, that is so much to remember. And I don't even want to be bothered to type a summary for all of that. That would be too much effort. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a property here, which is an AI summary. And here I'm going to literally click on that. So let's see what it does. No content. Oh, that's not very fun. So it looks like you can't just copy and paste stuff. If you've got a link block, you actually have to, use text which is natively inside of it. Unsync. I saved it. So here, let's try again. I'm going to just update that. Now that's in this page here properly and not synced to the other one, it gives me like a nice little summary. But this summary is a bit lengthy and I don't quite want it to look like that. So what I might do is I can go and fill it with something custom. I can tell the AI to, in bullet points, summarize the following: symptoms, signs, investigations, treatment. And you can put whatever you want, you can put checkpoints or whatever. I can't format it very well, I find, but if you say something like add a \n between each category, then it'll put a bit more space in between them, hopefully. So let's try it on this page and save the changes there. And you can see that it's created a much nicer summary for us. Actually, that's actually pretty good. And I think the power of that is not necessarily just for one page, but it's actually because if you do lots and lots and lots of different conditions or whatever, you can easily generate an AI summary. Or another way to do it would be to create some questions for yourself. So in a question answer format, try that. And now it's actually doing that. It's actually really good. That's sick. That's such a good prompt. I didn't even realize that would turn out so well. If you're in university now watching this, man, I am like envious because there's so much less writing that you have to do and so much more knowledge that you can just insert into your brain. There is a lot of other ways that I use AI, but I think if you check out the Ultimate ChatGPT tutorial, that sums up quite a lot of the ones I still use. So that's somewhere else on my YouTube channel. So yeah, that's AI in a nutshell for Notion.
Okay, it's me again, the real life Dabi. Thank you for watching this video, and just by watching, you're already supporting the channel, so I appreciate that you would spend your time nerding out with me. As I've mentioned a few times, if you wanted to buy the system, I'm going to put a link in the description below so that you can do that. I myself am still thinking about what exactly this channel is going to look like. I think I'm going to start to make a bunch of medical technology type stuff, but I haven't decided whether I'm going to put that on this channel or another channel. But if you want to follow along on the journey, then there'll be a newsletter down below, which you can also sign up to if you want to just, nerd out with me and continue to nerd out with me on different things. What I'm thinking about a lot is AI and software and that sort of thing, but I also generally think about productivity, and I'll probably put some reflections into that newsletter. This has been Dabi. Bye.